Welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. In today's episode, I'm joined by Nabil Sakkab, thought leader and pioneer of the open innovation movement to create disruptive business. Now, Nabil has had a really successful career serving on P&G's Leadership Council and Innovation Committee, of P&G's board of directors. He sits on a number of boards, both Fortune 200 companies and startup growth ventures, really helping drive the innovation agenda. Now, I've got to know Nabil over the last few years, visiting him in Las Vegas, and it's a real honor and privilege to have such an expert on the show today. So, Nabil, thanks for coming on and agreeing to be my guest.
My pleasure, Simon.
Excellent.
It's always good to talk to you.
Absolutely.
I always get inspired.
That's great. That is a compliment. A compliment. So tell me, my friend, we're going to take it all the way back to a young Nabil. Basically, I'm really interested to understand, what were the kind of key influences in your life growing up, as it were, and.
Well, that's a long story. I don't know if you have the time to listen to it all. So I'll go and stop me if you think I'm going too long. I was born in Jerusalem, and at the age of 10 months, my father moved us from Jerusalem to Bethlehem because he was avoiding the bombs. It was the Israeli-Arab war really in 1947, and the bombs drove him to leave his house and his business and move to Bethlehem to avoid the bombs. Now, Bethlehem is 6-7 miles away from Jerusalem, so it's not very far, but I grew up there really all of my career. Outside of what I would say the tourist season, which is around Christmas, this is a sleepy town. Not much stimulation for anything, You go to school, and that's about it. And you have friends, and you listen to Manchester United when they play. I went to a Catholic school, which followed the British system, O and A levels. I had good teachers, but frankly, they had limited horizons because they have also never been outside of the city or of the region, really. And they didn't have advanced degrees. They were not sources of stimulation, There was not much else really to stimulate your thinking. And the only two things that I recall that probably stimulated me most is I joined a local theater club, and I was I loved it. I was very good at it in acting. I was doing it in 3 languages: Arabic, English, and French, depending on the story or the theater. And I thought always that I'll be an actor someday.
Really? Really? Wow.
Because I didn't have any other things to think about,
Okay.
The other thing that stimulated me, I would say, is we had, my family had a supermarket. And it was run by my middle brother. Now, I am the youngest of 5. And the difference between me and them was 15 to 22 years.
Wow. Okay.
So my siblings never inspired me on anything because they didn't want to have anything to do with me. Except my middle brother, who ran the supermarket. And, I have to give him a lot of credit because he had a vision in the 50s. I'm talking about in the 50s, of creating a superstore, really, and where you can have a one-stop shop. And this is stuff that's happening in the Western world today. In the last few years. But this is not that you look at a place in the Middle East in a sleepy town, where you have a superstore. But the lessons you learn there are immense because you learn about, listening to consumers, listening to your customers, what they want, supplying them with the right products, because if you don't supply them with the right products, you go You have a lot of inventory that you have to dispose of. You also find out that there's a lot of other stores. So the only way for you to survive is to have brands and, what I would say, things, well-differentiated brands, things that nobody else has. So my brother used to spend enormous amounts of time to import products from the UK, from Italy, from Germany. And so our store was stocked with all kinds of premium brands from all around the world that nobody else had. And so this is how you make your margin. This is how you make your money. Because if you sell commodities, you don't survive because everybody else sells commodities. And I learned that because I had to work part in the store. I hated it, by the way, because I always felt I was destined for more. But anyway, I had to work because that was part of the contract with the family. Anyway, I did that, till I graduated, but I was not a top notch at class because I didn't care really about being first or second. I think I was probably top 10%. I don't know really, but I was not really inspired by school.
Really? You know what I mean?
I really wanted to do something different.
It's,
And
it's fascinating because when
yeah,
I look at you and your pedigree, and
yeah,
clearly you got into chemistry, right? You ended up with a
yeah,
PhD,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I would have thought you were going to tell me you grew up as a chemist and you fell in love with it when you were 6 years
No,
old.
no, not really, not really. I didn't know much about chemistry. I That's why I say it's a long story. And then when I graduated from high school, I said, I really have never been outside my town. I never seen the television. I've never, sort of like I've never seen the world. I didn't know anything about what's going on. And so I applied and I was accepted in Belgium at the University of Leuven University. And I said, I'm going to go out to Belgium and I'm going to study in French and I'm going to see the world. And so I packed my bags, went to Belgium at the age of whatever it was, 19 or 17, I don't know. And I don't know if you know much about Louvain, but at the time, it was a big struggle between the Flemish and the Walloons. It was constant fighting and demonstrations every day. So you have to learn how to survive. Second is this was a town of 40,000 inhabitants, but 40,000 students with 110 nationalities. And I have to say, you get exposed to 110 cultures and you learn the school of life, there was a bar for every 35 people. It was not an education in chemistry or physics or anything. It was an education on how to live, how to survive, how to ask. So between customer service at home in a store and between working in or studying in that kind of environment, I feel I was prepared for anything. Unfortunately, the 67 war happened. And I could not stay in Belgium because I lost contact with my family. I didn't know whether they were even alive, really. And I lost my funding and my support. And so I had to make a change. And so I went back to Lebanon. I went to Lebanon because I learned that the American University of Beirut was offering scholarships for displaced students who have suffered from the 67 war.
Right.
And I could not go home because I was not welcomed, by the government there to go back home. So I went to AUB, which is a premier institution, I have to say. I don't know what you know about AUB, but it is a premier school in the world, really. And I was accepted, and I was joined third year, really. And I wanted to go to medical school. So I went into my first anatomy class and I walked out immediately after because I couldn't handle working on a dead body. That was not my game. So I was struggling, frankly, what I would do really and what I would study. And believe it or not, went to a movie, and many times movies, teach you what the future is. And I went to this movie. You may have seen it. It's called The Graduate. And it's Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman, yes. Yeah.
Yes, and he was with Mrs. Robinson and her daughter, and he was talking to Mr. Robinson, and Mr. Robinson asked him, "What you want to do in your life?" And he told him whatever, blah blah blah, and he said, "Let me tell you about the future. The future is plastics." This is a famous line. I listened to that story and I said, "What is plastics?" I had no idea. So I went back and I asked, people around, what is plastic? They said, "Oh, it's organic chemistry. It's polymer chemistry." I said, that sounds interesting. Why don't I join the chemistry department and I'll see what I like.
Amazing.
And well, I joined the chemistry department and for 2 years, I was on the top of the dean's list throughout the entire university. I found my love, which was chemistry, and I had no clue, but I did so well, really, but I knew I did not want to specialize in chemistry. I did not want to really become a specialist. I did not going to be an inorganic chemist or a physical chemist. I wanted to be a good chemist, and so I learned all the tools and all the skills. And then I said, what am I going to do after graduation? And unfortunately, there was the civil war in Belgium. So another war I had to deal with. And I could not go home because the government won't let me. And so I had to come up with a solution. And the American Friends of the Middle East offered me the opportunity to travel to the US. They helped me to get a visa. They helped to fund my travel, and they helped to get me to apply to various universities. And I accepted the first offer that came, frankly. I had many offers there, but I accepted the first one. And that was Illinois Institute of Technology. And so I went to Chicago. So here I am at the age of 21 or 23, whatever it was. I have already lived in 3 continents, and I didn't have a hard time adjusting because I've got used to this kind of moving, around. And I joined the chemistry department there, and I chose, again, not to work my thesis around 3 or 4 subjects, because I did not want to specialize, really. I wanted to be a good problem solver, but not a specialist.
Mm.
And so my thesis has three pieces, 3 parts that have nothing to do with each other. Nothing. They were totally separate. I had 3 advisors, and I worked my ass off, really, to finish in 3 years. Typically, it takes 4 years to do a PhD. I did it in 3. Why? Because I got married, I had a child, I had another one on the way, and I needed a job. So I finished in 3 years, and I did well. But then at the time in 73 was the Nixon administration, and US was going through difficult times, the oil embargo, job freeze, salary freezes. I graduated, I could not get a job. Nobody was hiring, nobody. And so I said, what the heck, I'll just go to complete my rounding of education. I went to Texas A&M. The reason for that is Texas A&M had a chairman called Arthur Martell, and he was very famous for a number of things. People in chemistry will know who he is. And he was intent on building the premier chemistry department in the world. And he, seduced a tremendous amount of talent from all around the world to come and work in A&M. And I went to work for him as a postdoc. And he was good in solution chemistry, water chemistry, things like that, which I did not have as an experience. And I felt, hey, well, this will round me up and give me yet another notch on my gun, you know. And I joined this group, and 10 months later, you know, I noticed a job posting about P&G. And I went to sign up. I had nothing to do with the job description, because the job description was for a biochemist. I was not a biochemist. I was a good chemist, but not a biochemist. But nevertheless, I signed up, and I was number 27 on the list. So I said, "My God, you know, I'm never gonna get a job." So I signed up. I went in for the interview, and the guys, I said, "Look, let me tell you, I don't really fit what you're asking for, but let me tell you why I would be good for P&G." And he says, "Well, okay, let me hear you out." So I did my selling job, and 3 weeks later, I was invited to Cincinnati, and they offered me the job the same day I was there. And I joined the international group supporting and creating products for Latin America. And I have to tell you, I found in that job, from the first day, I found my purpose in life.
Wow. Tell me more about this. Well, I mean, it's a brilliant story. Tell me about the purpose.
I found my purpose in life. I mean, I didn't know what my purpose was. My purpose was first to be an actor. And I then realized, my God, really, what am I doing? You know, thinking I'm going to be an actor and Hollywood is 10,000 miles away, you know. That was not a future. And so in between, I didn't have a purpose. I was learning, and I was discovering, and I was searching, and I was, you know, doing everything that, you know, to help me find the door. And what's important in that term is that I never really closed any doors. Any door that opened, I just walked through. Sometimes it was a bad idea, but sometimes it was a good idea because I learned something. And so for 25 years or so, 27 years, all I did is go through doors. I just had one idea, which is I wanted to be a good problem solver, you know, but I didn't want to be a specialized person, really, you know, and so I went through all these doors. I learned a lot, and at P&G, from the first day I joined, my first job, I walked into the first day, and you know what, my boss had no PhD, had not even a bachelor's degree. He was a manager, good guy, really. I learned a lot from him because he was a great boss, you know. And the first day he said to me, he says, "Nabil, I want you today to take these socks and go to the orphanage and have the orphans wear these socks and not put any shoes, and, you know, just run around all day in the mud, in the dirt, outside, inside, whatever. At the end of the day, you pick up these socks and you come back and you start working on what is going on the socks, and how are we going to clean them." And, you know, I found my purpose, because it is all about finding what the consumer problem really is and how you can use your talent and your experience and your knowledge to really solve the problem. Because I believe innovation is no more than, it's two things. It's using knowledge to create social wealth. That's what innovation is. And it is about what's needed combined with what's possible. Sometimes you have to look at what's needed. Sometimes you have to start with what's possible. And the end result is to create social wealth, because otherwise it's patents that cost you money and serve no purpose.
Amazing.
You know, serve no purpose.
I love that. Tell me, Nabil, like, amazing story. I think the guy that hired you got it right? I mean, you went for a job and you went for a position where you didn't.
He did.
fit the criteria. And
Yeah, he saw my broad experiences, my good understanding of chemistry, and he said that's what we need around here.
amazing. So basically, you spent your whole career there. You were there for 33 years.
Correct.
You scaled the heights as the, the SVP for R&D. So you joined on that first day, and then you ended up, literally at the top you could go within that organization.
Right, right.
So
right.
just tell me, I know it's a 33 years, and you found your passion, and you had a great time there. But when you look back at those 33 years, what maybe give me an example of a couple of things you reflect really fondly on, you look back on a couple of things that you did that you really, you're proud of, or, you really think had impact, and you enjoyed doing.
Wow, I had several, I don't know which one to pick, but oh my goodness. I would say the first project I worked on was after learning about dirty socks and all that, was how could we develop a bleach? Bleach is, most detergents have bleaches in them. Like in the UK, you have Ariel and Persil, with concoction of all kinds of ingredients, and one of them is bleaching agents to remove fruit stains and wine stains and things like that. Now, unfortunately, in markets like Latin America, you cannot afford to use many of these ingredients because the detergent cost will be too high. So we needed to invent or innovate to develop a bleach that would work in these markets, and that would cost very little money. So spending a lot, over my, when you work at P&G and R&D, you spend a tremendous amount of time studying consumers. In fact, over my career, I probably have been in over 1,000 consumer homes. I'm working with them, looking at how they do things, having them teach me how to wash, how to clean, how to do this or that, and every market around the world. And you can see the diversity of the experiences you learn. Anyway, spending time in Mexico, I learned a lot about how their habits of washing. I felt that if we could probably develop, because they have line drying, they don't have dryers. They put their clothes on the line to dry. There's a lot of sun. So how can we use photochemistry to really deliver a bleaching experience? And so I spent a fair amount of time really using photochemistry to develop products that release nascent oxygen when exposed to the sun. So, and I built on that habit of soaking products for a long period of time before washing, so you don't have to use a lot of material, which means lower cost. And we executed that in first time. That was probably my first patents at P&G. And you can't believe when you go to the area and you watch consumers using these products, and they put their clothes on the line and they watch these stains disappearing in front of their eyes.
Amazing, isn't it?
And they think this is magic. This is magic. So I would say, and unfortunately, this technology has lasted. I did that in early 70s. I would say middle 70s. It's still in existence today. In many of these line drying markets, it's being used. So it stood the test of time.
Absolutely. No, that's great.
Another experience I would say is, I was in a SAC. P&G is very good at this. They throw you into the dental area. Now I know nothing about teeth. I know nothing about dentistry or anything like that. But I was in charge of dental research. after 4 years in the company. What do you say? I mean, the chemist in charge of that research, I mean, this is like, you shake your head. Anyway, I took the job seriously, and I spent the first 6 months, plowing the books, learning everything about dentistry that I could, talking to dentists. We had a few dentists in the company that I spent a lot of time with, and I knew all the heads of the best researchers, where are the hotspots around the world. I went visited these people in the UK, in Denmark, in the US, in Japan. I went all over the world, really learning from all these, what I would call gurus. After 6 months, I can tell you, I could diagnose any problem by looking at your mouth. I could not work on your mouth because that's not my base, but I understood the chemistry, I understood the microbiology, and I understood what was required to really win in that market. And so I concluded that probably there were two things that I'm proud of there is we ran a lot of clinical studies at P&G. And, hundreds of clinical studies, lots of kids. And we used to get their baby teeth. And so I spent a fair amount of time investigating baby teeth, thousands of them. And we discovered, cut the long story short, how fluoride works, which set the stage for all improvements in the future, really, for P&G. Helped us better understand how to plan and develop the future. The second thing I would say I did there, which I'm really proud of, is one of the biggest problems people have is you go to the dentist to clean your teeth every 6 months. And what is all of that is tartar, really. It's calcium phosphate deposits on your teeth. And so I said, hey, why don't we develop a product really to do that, rather than how you have to go to the dentist all the time, or at least reduce the time between dentist visits. And if you think about innovation, you say, okay, think about the mouth as a washing machine. I had a lot of time in the washing machine. So if you think about the mouth as a washing machine, you say, what can we use the same kind of chemical? And in the washing machine, we spend a fair amount of time learning how to manage the dirt that you remove from the clothes, not to redeposit on the clothes. So you say, hey, this is the same principle. Why don't we use the same principle that when you brush your teeth, we developed the same kind of chemistry to prevent the things you remove from redepositing on your teeth. And sure enough, we came up with a technology that prevented tartar deposits. And we launched a product, was a big hit for P&G. It still is today. Everybody uses it because patents have expired, and most competition use the technology today, but it's become a staple really in the world of dentistry. I did a lot of other things in dentistry, but I don't have time to talk about them today. But that was a lot of fun, too. And I also learned, I would say two other big experiences I'm fond of is what I call the soap wars in Europe. Where I was, Unilever. We were winning in detergency in Europe, at the expense of Unilever, really, and we were really cruising. That's in the 90s, and in the 90s, both Henkel and in Germany and Unilever were losing share to us big time. And one of these, and Lever had been planning to attack, a counterattack, and they developed this technology that, I don't know if you remember this, but they came up with something that was manganese catalyst, which they were proud of, and they launched to attack so they can really destroy Ariel. And I had anticipated this move, and we were prepared because it had a lot of flaws. It caused holes in clothes.
Did it? Okay. Okay.
And so when they launched it, we had a big fight, which turned in the newspapers, and it was for me 1 year. I had to take off and work with our CEO, and we were, accused of aerial bombardment. you know, the Brits, used the Ariel name, and Ariel,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and they turned it into Ariel, Aerial, aerial bombardment,
Really?
PNG, and we had anyway. It was 10 months, which I spent. I had to sit in front of Niall Fitzgerald from P&G and tell him that his products are failing, and he didn't want to hear me. And it was a risk I took because, in a way, my CEO asked me a question. He says, "Are you sure that that product causes holes?" And I knew that if I was wrong, I probably would be fired, and if I was right, so be it. And
No
little did
upside. There's no upside.
no, there's no upside. Little did I know that our CEO that day, he was a very tough man. Okay, he is famous. Is Ed Arts. He's called the Prince of Darkness. He was a fighter, and he looked at me and he said, "What's the name of the CEO over there?" He said, "Niall Fitzgerald." He walked out of the room. He called him. He came back. He says, "What are you doing this afternoon?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Join me at the hotel. We're going to prepare for a meeting tomorrow with Niall Fitzgerald." I said, "What?" He says, we are going to go with me, and we're going to go and tell him that their product is screwed up." I mean, this is never in history. This is a case that is now taught in business schools. Because it was an experience of how did we end up defeating Unilever and getting them out of the laundry business in Europe and in the US. It was amazing because that was a major revenue loss for Lever. And
Tell me about the meeting. Tell me about the meeting then. Did you go to the meeting with the?
oh yeah, I was walked into what do you call that place in London, Unilever. My goodness, escaped my mind now. I walked in with my CEO and my at the time CTO, and we walked into the room, and it was a square room, and Niall Fitzgerald was sitting on one end, and his entourage. They put me on the opposite end, and Ed Arts, our CEO and CTO, were on my right end, and on the left were the R&D people of Unilever, heads of R&D. And our CEO started, went on the attack, and then turned the meeting over to me, and he says, "Tell Niall what we've learned." And I had these sensational, pictures of underwear that has had holes, in it, and it was really things that it's for the tabloids. It's tabloid pictures I showed, and he was irritated. Niall Fitzgerald I used to call him snake eyes, because he never really showed you his eyes. He always wore dark glasses and looking at you. And he could not stand me standing in front of him and going, right on his face. And he looked after like 15 minutes of me talking, he looked at me and he said, "I have heard enough. I don't want to hear anymore. I just want to talk to Ed. You go with the R&D people in another room and you talk to them." I said, okay. I went to the R&D room, and they were trying to convince me that I was wrong. And I said, look, I know I'm right because this is based on fundamental inorganic chemistry that I have done my thesis on. And I know it back and forth. So you cannot convince me that I'm wrong. And here's why I'm right. Anyway, we chose to disagree. Soap war started, and that was in the papers every day, Financial Times, all that stuff. I was interviewed all over the place. I have a book of probably 1,000 newspaper articles about the subject.
Wow, amazing, amazing story.
and, and,
So,
and then in the end, they admitted they were wrong.
they were wrong. So
They
tell
were
me,
wrong.
was this around? I remember you had quite a strategic relationship with like Novozymes, for instance, on the enzymes. Was that around that kind of time you started using some of their kind of biology and some of their kind of enzymes?
Yeah, well, we use biology, from that's way before me. During the, I would say, the 70s.
Okay.
We were working with Novozymes and Genencor in the US.
Yeah.
And during my time, we expanded the use of enzymes in detergents from, I would say, one or two enzymes to 6. So by the time I left, we were 6 enzymes in liquid aerial, doing different things, and that was really that was big differentiation for P&G, really, because nobody else had these enzymes. We only had them ourselves. They had the basic 2, which is proteases and amylases, but nobody else had the other enzymes that we had developed over the years, and in collaboration with Novozymes and Genencor. And that was my introduction to biotechnology, really, at the time, but it was limited to that space, really.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me, what I find quite interesting is, you really led the whole open innovation kind of revolution there at P&G, and I suppose your legacy, or part of your legacy, is the work that you did around that, right? And nowadays, I talk to everyone, and it's a buzzword now. It's a buzzword. Everyone's
Right.
open innovation.
Right.
You kind of pioneered this, for instance. So
Right.
maybe just tell me a little bit around, what was the real context behind it? What did you really see, and why open innovation, and what kind of impact did it have?
Well, where did I start? 1996, 25 years ago. I was put in charge of R&D of the largest business unit of P&G. It was fabric and home care, worldwide. At the time, I think that unit was $10 billion in size, give or take. Maybe a little bit less, I don't remember really, but say $10 billion. I had 2,300 R&D people spread all around the world. And I asked a simple question. The company had a history of doubling its size every 10 years. So I said, okay, why should I be any different? I'm $10 billion. At the time, I think P&G was maybe 40 billion, because we were about 25% of P&G. And so if I'm going to stay in this job for 10 years, I need to double this business in 10 years. So to double this business, I need to add $10 billion. To add $10 billion, I need $100 million ideas. And if we look at the statistics, statistics say you need 1,000 ideas to get a big idea. So if I need 100, what was that? I said 100 1,000 ideas. I mean, do the math. It's not impossible with 2,300 R&D people that I'm going to be able to double this business. It's not possible. So I said to myself, on top of that, I was looking at statistics that 30% of patents were issued to individuals at that time, not to corporations. So if you really wanted to find out what the leading edge is thinking, you're going to look at these patents, these 30% of people that were patenting and you had no idea who they are, There was no internet. There was, 1996, that's the period we were at. And so I looked at myself and I said, E equals MC squared, or I equals MC squared. I is innovation, M is a constant, and C is connections. C, how many people you know?
Yeah.
So I said to myself, if I'm going to know what the future is, I have to find the people who have been there, because they already been there. So why do I need to fight to find the future? And I set up, I worked with a corporate group next to me who were supporting my group to develop a search engine. We developed a search engine before Google called Bullseye. We didn't have the vision to make it a Google, but we used it very effectively to search for technologies and people around the world, because we had access to the internet. It just was not as effective as today, We joined with Eli Lilly on Innocentive. Innocentive was a network that basically was problem solving for all kinds of chemistry problems. Now, why did I do that? Because I was in a conference in 96 or 97, I can't remember, and an FBI agent came to talk. And the FBI agent was talking about, terrorism and so on, and was talking about how they identify different situations. He was using an example of, they take a page from a book and they post it on the internet and they say, where did this come from? And so it was sort of like stimulating to me, Another experience was a Gold Corp, which is a Canadian company, which had a gold mine, which had, was losing a lot of money despite it had a lot of gold. And so the guy that owns the mine said, I'm going to publish my entire mining data on the internet and have people prospect, and I'm going to reward people for finding where's the best place the gold is, as opposed to us just digging everywhere. And guess what? In the span of 6 months, he zeroed in on the best places to mine and turned them gold from a loser to a profitable situation, despite the fact that everybody thought this was heretic. So at P&G, I said, shit, I'm going to post our problems on the internet. And if my competition sees that, so be it. If they want to work on my problems, that's good, because they're not working on their problems. And so we started posting problems on Innocentive. And we were getting responses from all over the world about this or that. So soon after, we created, jointly with outsiders, 9 Sigma, which was another network that was part of our group. We had DuPont had created a network called what was that called? Oh my goodness, I can't remember the name now. Anyway, networks started to develop those types. And I said, I'm going to change the entire way we innovate. So I established strategic partnerships with Novozymes, with BASF, with a whole bunch of people. And I said, we're going to be partners. I'm going to share with you all our problems, all our R&D. You share your stuff. We're going to collaboratively work. And patent-wise, we own the application, you own the material. That's very simple. It doesn't matter who invents. And that was another, heretic thing to do, because, P&G doesn't do these kinds of things.
That's brilliant.
And so I said, this is how we're going to operate. And I even set up a lab in BASF that was P&G lab in Ludwigshafen, and we were solving problems faster than you would imagine, because that was historically it used to take years to solve the damn problem. We were solving these problems in months. You know why? Because we were collaborating. I had my people on the BASF campus.
Amazing.
And that was, late 90s. I mean, that was heretic. I mean, you talk about doing that today. Today is probably, it happens, because now P&G, at least in Europe, has opened their facilities to all kinds of startups to come in and do work, really, and use the infrastructure and so on and so forth, which is a vision I had in early 2000, really.
Well, so a couple of things about that.
Yeah.
Did you achieve the goals that you wanted with the growth of the business then, in terms of, did you
Yes. I mean, there's no way. I mean, we were making connections that we never had before. We were really solving problems faster. We were growing. We were identifying ideas. I can cite many examples, really. For example, not me, but our paper division developed the technology, or our corporate group developed a technology which was what I would say it was a new kind of structured film that was very useful for things like wrapping things at home, for trash bags, it had a lot of flexibility, and once you press it, it will seal, and you don't have to do anything else except press. And that was really very novel technology. And we had a vision to start a new business of competing with Clorox, which was a major competitor of P&G, against their Glad brand, which was trash bags, paper wrappers, and so on. And then but we were sort of like saying, oh, look, the capital costs are enormous, this and that. So what we did in our business unit, or our unit, said, hey, we could easily, why don't we just go to Clorox and offer them the technology and get a piece of their action? Why go ourselves do it? Now this is not P&G. This is a new P&G. And we did that. And guess what? Over the last 15 years, probably the revenue from that decision alone, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Amazing. Yeah.
Another example is BASF had a polymer that we identified. They came to us and said, hey, you could use this to erase stains on walls. It's like an eraser. And we said, why don't we take it? We took it and we launched it. Major business for P&G. We didn't do anything except take it from BASF. Now, that is new also to P&G, because everybody works on a not invented here syndrome. It's a real problem in big corporations. To take something that's ready and launch it was not an easy thing. R&D people find that. They found flaws in it, but we didn't.
It's amazing. I'd say, well, you fast forward now, and then you look at the innovation landscape now. You see these hubs, the ecosystem of innovation, the technologies and entrepreneurs and the ventures into the space now, open innovation. I mean, you must be very excited to see the landscape in the innovation space now.
I do. It means tremendous amount. I would say, the biggest barrier to open innovation in a big corporation, and I can tell you that for sure, because I've seen it everywhere, is open innovation to work and to succeed. It must be driven from the top. If it's not driven from the top and is delegated, it never works.
Yeah.
Never works.
Right.
Why? Because if a leader like yourself or myself or anybody who is in the right position does not demand it and hold people accountable to it, it doesn't work. Because human nature is to invent and develop by yourself, because that's what people are rewarded for historically, will continue to be. I hire you to do a job. I hire you to use your skills to develop something new or to advance or to change the world or whatever. I don't hire you to go and execute somebody else's idea.
Yeah.
Or to work with somebody else on an idea. And so the human nature is to close themselves in a room and really do it by themselves, not to collaborate. And unless it's driven from the top, which I did, because when I was in that job, that was my biggest contribution, is my insistence and my holding people accountable to doing it. I expected them. I put that in their performance reviews. I rewarded them for doing it. I could care less if they had 35 patents for the year, because that didn't build any business for me, it didn't generate any revenue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to have 35 patents, but I wanted to also see, what are we doing with this stuff, really? How are we creating social wealth? And social wealth through collaboration, through experience. Sometimes it comes from our own work, which is okay. I'm not saying we should not create ourselves too. But, co-creation is important and should be expected. Yeah. And when it's not led from the top, it gets delegated. I've seen many VPs, many CTOs adopted that, but frankly, go on their life as usual, managing their day-to-day business and so on. And that doesn't work. You've got to build relationships. I used to say that R&D is about relationships and development. It's not about, it's about cigar and discussion.
Yeah, I love it. I would have loved to have hired for you back in the day.
Yeah, that's what it is. If you don't build relationships, you don't have any, really.
Yeah.
And so you've got to really go out, and that's why we coined the word connect and develop, rather than research and develop.
Yeah, I love that.
I
love that. That's brilliant.
And today you see a lot of people adopting open innovation, working. Yeah, it's good. You see a lot of lean innovation, which is good, because I'm on the board of several companies and so on, and when you walk in and you find out that, hey, they're all sort of like how do I describe it? It's like physics over the years, physics, space over the years. 200 years ago, we were Newtonian. What is Newtonian? It's command and control. You put a chemist in a lab, you close the doors, you give them a hood and a bench, and you say, create something. Well, that world is gone. We moved to quantum mechanics, 100 years ago. And quantum mechanics is about what? It's about sharing. It's about orbitals. It's about sharing orbitals. It's about people collaborating. It's about not a lab. It's about a big lab with a lot of people in it, so they can interact, And now, 100 years later, we are in I would say, chaos world, where one day you have a lab, the next day you don't. You may be sitting in a chair somewhere, or you may be sitting in a bench, or you may be sitting somewhere else. So you have to get used to the fact that there is no structure. It is a chaotic world, and most people. So you walk into these companies and you find they're all still in the Newtonian world, and you say, "Well, wait a minute, Why are you that way? Why don't you just, you know, if you are a company that's like P&G, a chemistry company, and then you want to get into electronics, which I did, 25 years ago, I don't want to go and create an electronics department really to help me. A stupid thing to do really, because we have no electrical engineers, we have no,
Yeah.
why don't we just go and find these these skills somewhere else
Yeah.
and make them part of our group, and we did. And we came up with all kinds of devices that complemented our chemistry that we didn't have to create ourselves, And you say, yeah, that's lean innovation. It's testing and retest. And you learn at P&G, and which many people haven't learned yet, is that you've got to really work with your customers, with your consumers. You have to, P&G's success is all driven by the fact that we're all focused on consumers. We work with them, we go back and forth, we keep honing and try and fail and redo it, and redirect it until you get it right. 25% of the R&D budget goes on consumer research. People say that's crazy. No, it's not crazy. I had a budget of $300 million in that job in fabric and healthcare. And $300 million, I was spending $75 million on consumer research.
Really? Wow. Wow.
You say, what the hell are you doing? Well, that means I used to take people, put them, when we opened Eastern Europe, you take people and you put them in Eastern Europe to live with families. Why? Because it's how you learn how they make assessments and decisions in the home. Why they buy the products they buy,
Brilliant. I love that. Tell me a question for you. Well, you mentioned before, your experience from a board viewpoint is really interesting, because clearly you sit on your Fortune 200 board, your company like Givaudan for many years, and then you also work with the startups, for instance. So you get both sides of it. How different is that from your perspective of working for a company whose very DNA is to innovate, as opposed to working with a corporate big Fortune company and trying to get them to shift the needle, basically?
Oh boy, it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
In a startup, I'm either chairman or a working member. I roll up my sleeves. I do the work. I'm impatient as hell. Time is money.
Yeah.
It's you can't wait to get the answer. You're very impatient. You really want the answers now.
Yeah.
In a big corporation, it's hierarchy, slow decision making, getting many people on board before you take action.
Doesn't it drive you mad though?
It drives me crazy. It drives me absolutely nuts. I can't stand it. And without really revealing names, because it's not useful here, but it has taken me years to get some of these companies to get lean innovation established. Years. and I finally see the value, because you can do it in a larger corporation. It's just you have to have the right leadership and the right expectations. And many of the business leaders and many of the CTOs are not prepared for that kind of stuff. They're not led. And their bosses, their business bosses, don't know enough to expect that from them, the CTOs. So you have sometimes the blind leading the blind, and to try to instill that and to change, it's generation changes, and if you put in young people in our organization, they get lost, because that's not what I expected from them. That's not what they're rewarded for, and so they never do it. And so you have to as I said, it's a generational change. Or if you pull somebody from one job and put them down in that job, but you've got to change the CEO. Because if the CEO doesn't know, he is expecting the wrong things from his subordinate. And it's really tough, really tough. Now, I have to say, they're also not very highly connected. I used to, when I was a P&G, I used to say, My business card, which said senior VP, whatever the hell it said, is only good when I'm at P&G. Once I leave P&G, I am a citizen. My business card says citizen of the world. That's it. So if I really want to be successful, I've got to really know people. I've got to really have a contact list. I've got to really have a Rolodex that's long enough that allows me to really establish a new business card in the future, because citizen of the world is okay, but I'd like something else too. And the only way you can do that is you've got to build relationships. You got to build connections. You got to know people. My philosophy was spend more time out of the office than in the office. Now people say, Nabil is also someone else, blah, blah, blah. Not really, because I effectively delegated areas where I was comfortable delegating, and I didn't have to be in every business meeting that existed. That's wrong. Many people think they have to be in every meeting that exists, and that's wrong, because what you're doing is wasting your time. I used to say, I need to be in a business meeting where I can make a difference. If I don't make a difference, I'm going to go and build relationships. I'm going to go and find out, discover. I'm going to go and learn. I'm going to go and see what people are doing. I go to China. I built the first China Technical Center in the world. Sorry, not first. Microsoft was the first. We were second. I built that in 1995. Why? Because I went to China. I was in charge of Asia R&D at the time. And I knew China was going to become a big force. I spent a fair amount of time in China learning how am I going to build a technical center. I built relationships with the best university in China, which is Tsinghua. I got to know the president, one-on-one, went out to dinners with it, blah, blah, blah. I built a technical center there for $7 million, which was, I rented the floor in one of their buildings on Tsinghua campus. I equipped it for $7 million. It would cost hundreds of millions to build the technical center. I did it for $7 million. Why? Because I told them, look, we will use this university facilities. We will leave, and we will leave you these nice benches and these nice, we will house 300 people, which you could turn into a laboratory for free. So I became a friend of the dean or the provost, whatever you want to call him. And we established that. And today it's, we have built a new technical center, 1,000 people and so on. That's fine. But you don't do that by sitting in your office in Cincinnati.
Definitely not.
And planning the world,
Definitely.
I learned I have to be with consumers. I've got to, when I launch a product, I got to go and talk to consumers, find out what they think about it. Not sitting in the lab and waiting for a report to come from some idiot,
Nabil, your energy is unbelievable. Suddenly I'm transported. I didn't know you back then, but I'm thinking 15, 20 years ago, you in this role, and the billion things that you were doing, and the energy and the drive, and the other thing as well, just to point out and say that your work inspired a whole legion of people, and I've spoken to many people that have worked with you closely over the years. And, you've really kind of inspired with your philosophies and your develop and connect and your philosophies. And I love working in the innovation space now, and I love that kind of connectedness around it. And, it's great. And listen, I really...
No, it's great, really. I'm having fun today because, the startups give me a lot of energy too, because, I'm involved in areas which I know nothing about. I got into biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. Now, that's not my background. I know nothing about that, but, it's like any other thing I did in my life, you roll up your sleeves and you learn. And so I'm doing it, I'm having fun and learning a lot of new stuff, really, that, was not in my data, but in my Rolodex, I should say, new connections, new people, and I'm making a difference, because many of these startups will be very successful down the road, really, and they're very novel technologies and very disruptive because I live on disruption. I love disruption.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're living in a world of disruption at the moment, so it's
Yeah, it's my game.
Exactly. Listen, Nabil, what a brilliant chat. I mean, I've loved talking with you. I could talk to you for hours. Maybe this is just part one, Nabil. Maybe we need to do
Okay.
part two.
Yeah, no problem, really. Yeah, I mean, that was fun, really, and probably I talked more than I should.
No, Nabil, it was unique. It was absolutely unique. So listen, thanks very much for joining me. I really appreciate
pleasure, my friend, and let's stay in touch, huh?